Okay, today we're going to talk about solving a quadratic equation, and we're going to do a different method than factoring, and we use this when we cannot factor, and that's called by completing the square. Please make sure that you take out a piece of loose leaf paper if you chose not to print out the note. You might want to hit pause and copy these down, or at least print out page 2 of this presentation. So to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square, the first thing that we're going to do is isolate the terms with the variables, which means your letters, to one side, and we're going to move the plain numbers to the other. Then you're going to write x plus something squared equals the answer, because that's your plain letters, your plain numbers, the plain numbers, plus blank. We're going to cut the number in front of the x term in half and put it in the parentheses after the variable. So if we look at that, we're going to cut the number in front of the x term in half, and we're going to put that here. Then you're going to square that term that you just cut in half and put it in the blank. It will always be positive. Please make sure you put a big star here. This number here has to be positive all the time. And then we're going to solve the equation. So if we look at the first example, step 1 says we want to make sure that the letters are on the left and the plain numbers are on the right. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides to put it in the correct format. So this becomes y squared minus 4y equals 1. Now I'm going to write my parentheses with a squared. I'm going to write 1 plus blank. Next, I'm going to cut this number in half. So if I cut negative 4 in half, I get negative 2. And I should have put a y here, sorry. So that's half. Now I'm going to take this number and square it. So negative 2 squared is positive 4. Now I'm going to solve my equation. If I simplify this a bit, it becomes y minus 2 squared equals 1 plus 4 is 5. Now if we go back to your rules for solving equations, the opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. Now I have y minus 2 equals, and remember when we square root, it's both positive and negative. So the square root plus or minus the square root of 5. The last step to get the y by itself, or whatever letter is there, is we're going to move that 2 over. So now I have y equals 2 plus or minus radical 5. And that is my answer. Remember, we cannot add a whole number and a radical together, so that's why it looks like it's two different terms, because it is. Next example. First thing that we're going to do is make sure we have letters on the left and numbers on the right. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So now I have x squared minus 4x equals 7. The next step, I'm going to write my parentheses squared equals the answer plus blank, and I'm going to put an x in front. Now I'm going to take this number and I'm going to cut it in half. So half of negative 4 is negative 2. Now I'm going to take that number and I'm going to square it. So negative 2 times negative 2, or negative 2 squared, is positive 4. This number in the blank always has to be a positive number. Now I'm going to simplify a little bit. I have x minus 2 squared equals 7 plus 4 is 11. Now we're going to solve. To get rid of a squared, right here, we're going to square root both sides. Remember, this is positive and negative. So the square knocks out, the square root knocks out the square. And then I have plus or minus radical 11. And the last step to get the x by itself, I have to move the whole number to the other side, so I get x equals 2 plus or minus radical 11. And those are my answers. Next one. First thing we want to do is check. We want the letters on the left and the numbers on the right. So in this case, I have to add 4w to both sides. So now I have w squared plus 4w equals, and I'm going to copy this down, negative 8. Next, I'm going to write my set of parentheses, squared equals the answer plus blank. I'm going to put a w there because that's my variable for this question. Now I'm going to cut this number in half. Half of 4 is 2. Now I'm going to square that number, 2 times 2, and I get 4. So here, if I simplify, I get w plus 2 squared equals negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. Now to get rid of a squared, right here, again, we're going to square root both sides. So now the square root knocks out the square, so I have w plus 2 equals plus or minus radical negative 4. Now, in another unit or two, we're going to learn that the square root of a negative 4, this becomes an I and that becomes a 2. We don't really need to worry about that yet. So if I want to simplify it, this becomes plus or minus 2i. And the last step, I'm going to move the whole number over. So my answer becomes w equals negative 2 plus or minus 2i. And again, for now, you can leave this negative 2i as the square root of negative 4, because I did not teach you the lesson on imaginary numbers yet. Next example. Again, the first thing we want to do, letters on the left and numbers on the right. So I'm going to move my 10a over to this side. And at the same time, I'm going to move the 33 over to the other side. Again, I want letters on the left and numbers on the right. So this becomes a squared minus 10a. And then over here, I get negative 33. Now I'm going to write my set of parentheses. Squared equals negative 33 plus blank. I'm going to put an a here. I'm going to cut this number in half. Half of negative 10 is negative 5. Now I'm going to square it. Negative 5 squared is 25. Now again, I'm going to simplify. So a minus 5 squared equals negative 33 plus 25 is negative 8. To get rid of the squared, I'm going to square root both sides. So now I have a minus 5 equals positive and negative, radical negative 8. Again, later on in the course, we are going to learn a negative radical makes an I. If you wanted to simplify this, 4 times 2 gives me 8. The square root of 4 is 2. So I would rewrite this as a minus 5 equals plus or minus 2i radical 2. And the last step would be to add the 5 to both sides. So again, I would have a equals 5 plus or minus 2i radical 2. Again, because they did switch the order in the curriculum, I would accept an answer at this point in the course as 5 plus or minus radical negative 8. If you have any questions, please make sure that you write them down and either email me or ask me next time you see me in class.